All right, so hello and welcome to the video. In this video, I'm going to address the incorrect notion of God that is in all three Abrahamic religions, and in fact, all religions, and the incorrect definition of almightiness and omnipotence that is even in the dictionary, because the dictionary defines omnipotence as having unlimited power as God. And that's actually not a correct definition of the word omnipotent, because that is not a self-consistent definition of omnipotent. All right. Being almighty or being the supreme being is under the definition of the phrase the almighty is more correctly defined as simply the supreme being without reference to what his power may or may not be. All right. The ontological argument does not make the claim that a being capable of doing anything hypothetical is possible. The ontological argument simply makes the claim that there is one supreme being, that there is something in the universe, or before the universe, rather, that is the greatest conceivable being that can actually exist, and that is God, not a being that can do anything hypothetical or nonsensical. That has never been claimed by anybody who believes in God, at least um not in an informed manner. If they thought they were claiming that, they're either an atheist trying to make an irrational argument against God, or they're a believer making an irrational argument for God, which is sometimes just as bad because it then drives people away from God when an ignorant person tries to argue for God. They attribute nonsensical claims to God and then make God look like a liar or a fool or something like that, and then the atheists get mad at God. All right? So this is why this is important. Don't attribute something to God that even God himself cannot and does not do. For example, God is not a deceiver. God is not a liar. In one of Paul's writings, he claimed that God was going to intentionally deceive unbelievers to drive them away that much more, that he would send them strong to delusion and make them believe a lie. Well, James actually wrote his epistle to rebuttal Paul, because Paul was teaching complete nonsense. Everything Paul taught was a complete falsehood. Um, and James lays that out and calls Paul a vain man in his epistle. All right. He debunked justification by faith in his epistle, contrary to Swaggart's claim. And he told them that God does not lie. Is one of the attributes of God, is that God does not and cannot lie. He didn't just say God does not lie. He said God cannot lie. Because, in fact, an almighty being is required to be self-consistent. There's no such thing as an evil almighty being. It's only possible that God be almighty and good at the same time, because goodness is a positive, is a strong attribute, whereas evil is actually a weak attribute. Uh, Almightiness means that the person already has omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence, and every other attribute you can imagine that is good is maximized. But that does not mean that God can simply do anything that your hypothetical mind can imagine. All right. For example, the create a stone too heavy to lift and then lift it stupidity that atheists try to confuse believers with. All right. That is not a self consistent hypothetical statement. And therefore, God is not required to judge himself or anyone else by that statement, other than to blame the atheist for being stupid enough to propose that. God cannot violate his own existence, and he can't violate his own law. That's why he's not a liar and he cannot lie. I actually had an atheist one time demand that God destroy himself and then recreate himself from nothing, and only then would the atheist believe in God, or words to that effect, because he kept demanding that an almighty being should be able to both exist and non exist at the same time, which is also nonsense. You see, you cannot propose any nonsense you want to believe in and then demand that God live up to that nonsense. That is a complete fallacy and stupidity and nonsense. It's not in any way attributable to the real supreme being, the creator God. So, what does it mean that God has to be self-consistent? It means he actually does have to forgive you, and without the cross, first of all, because he has love and he has mercy and humility, he is able to lower his other attributes and forgive you in spite of being perfectly righteous. All right. If God did not have love, mercy, or humility, the cross wouldn't help you either. All right, you and I would both be doomed if God did not have those attributes. But the cross doesn't help anybody on anything. That is an outright lie. First of all, the book of Numbers says God is not a man nor the son of man. So he's not Jesus, even though Jesus went around claiming to be God, and so did the apostles. Went around claiming Jesus was God. He's not. He was a false prophet, and so were the apostles. And it's a wonder that James didn't renounce Christianity, because he was so close to renouncing Christianity in his epistle that he should have gone ahead and renounced Christianity. There is no such thing as an almighty being that can exist and not exist at the same time, or that can contradict himself, because he would then be not self-consistent, and being able to do everything while still being self-consistent, it makes him the greatest conceivable being. All right. So, for example, I made this argument in a post just now on Facebook a little while ago, and I'm going to post this video explaining this. God cannot clone himself, even though he is almighty. All right. He's the real definition of almighty, not the fake definition of almighty. The attempt to clone himself will fail. All right. Because the closest thing he could create to a clone is not the original. The closest thing he could create to a clone is not the first cause. The closest thing he could create to a clone is not self-eternal. The closest thing he could create to a clone is not almighty, and so on down the line. So the clone has failed to have at least 4 attributes of God just by the definition of self-consistency, that he could not create something co-equal to himself, which also debunks the Trinity. All right. And debunks Jesus' claim of having been created or begotten by God in an eternity past, when he debated with the rulers of and claimed to have seen Satan fall from heaven, which was a complete lie. All right. Nowhere in the Bible does it even claim, other than Jesus, does it even claim that Satan was created in heaven. In the book of Job, it tells you that Satan was on the earth. Nor does anywhere in the Bible ever tell you, other than Jesus, that Satan was a fallen angel. All right. The word Lucifer appears exactly 1 time in the Bible, and the context tells you it is the name of a man, not the name of a fallen angel. So where people get the notion that Lucifer and Satan are the same person, I don't know that either, because it's not in the Bible. They just make up whatever they want to believe, and then they teach it from behind a pulpit and expect you to believe it. Because the only names that are specifically attributed to Satan in the law and prophets are Satan, Hasatan, and Bel, B-E-L, and Beelzebub. Those are the names of Satan in the law and prophets, not Lucifer. As I said, Lucifer appears only 1 time in the Bible, and it is the name of a man, as the context shows, not the name of a fallen angel. So the whole story of Lucifer, of Satan having once been named Lucifer and leading praise and worship in heaven, is a complete myth that has no basis in anything real or provable, and no basis in the Bible at all. I don't know where it comes from, but it has no basis in anything factual or historical. And I'm not defending Satan or Lucifer by any means, because they're both evil. And while I'm on that, the Constitution of the United States does not give you a right to be a witch or a Satanist. It gives you a right to have freedom of religion. Witchcraft and Satanism deny God. All right? That's not a valid religion. Witchcraft and Satanism are actually special forms of atheism. The Constitution does not give you a right to be an atheist. It gives you a right to freedom of religion. The man who wrote the Declaration of Independence believed in God, and he would by no means give you a legal right to be an atheist or a witch or a Satanist. Matter of fact, they were still burning witches and Satanists at the stake at the time the Declaration of Independence was written. Do you understand me? So where people get this nonsense that we have in this modern generation It also has no basis in historical fact.